All right, well, let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's TalentTelligent webinar, which is called Things Talent Practitioners Think About, and it's a roundtable. And over the next 60 minutes or so, we're going to lay some foundational talent concerns that much well-known foundational research has addressed, and things that a lot of academic programs, whether or not it's human resource degrees or HRD, human resource development, or OD, organizational development, cover, we're going to jump into that pool. And it is our plan to present these things in a series of topics. And I think we have 4 webinars that are planned this year. And our aim is to tackle the empirical and make them applicable. And so the roundtable nature of this is to get you to consider the research and react to it in a number of ways, as well as save some time for us to talk about it at the end of our time together. So that is our roundtable concept. My name is Lisa Marie Hanson, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at TalentTelligent. And I've spent about 30 years or so as a talent practitioner. I've implemented talent initiatives using research-based tools, both inside organizations and from a consulting firm standpoint. And within consulting, I have facilitated close to 1,000 multi-day certification programs across the world. And those topics included things like competencies, assessment tools, 360s, potential, and more. And this series is a culmination of the things that most folks in our profession asked in those classes. And I have parking lots full of, hey, what was that citation? Or what was that book that most people read? And so that was really the impetus of having this. I see a lot of friends who may have contributed to those parking lots on our participant list as well. So thank you for coming. The guy pictured next to me is none other than Gareth Rockmorton, my colleague and my partner at TalentTelligent. Garrick is a founding member of our firm. He operationalizes much of the thought leadership that our gurus send to us, and he's a talent practitioner in his own right, an adjunct instructor at Wake Forest. He's a researcher in the area of culture and well-being, and is certainly a subject matter expert. Hey, Garrick, your mic works fine, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Great. All right. Well, please do check out our professional profiles on LinkedIn and connect with us. And I'm also going to do a shout out to our colleague, Dan. And Dan, if you wouldn't mind putting your email in the chat panel for everybody, for anybody who has a follow-up question or needs a point at TalentTelligent. I'm going to quarterback today, and Garrick is going to chime in and staff the chat panel for clarity or citations or reinforcement. And I'm hoping that this chat panel can be an extension of the conversation. And I would say keep him on his toes. He's a great resource, literally at your fingertips. So go ahead and do that. I'm just going to say it. We're total nerds, and we're expected to know and to read a lot of research in our roles, and to be able to relay that to people and the others who work with us. And that is what this seminar was born from. So maybe you're new to the field of talent management, or have an interest in people, or maybe you fell into HR by accident, or you're a vet and you're looking to know how information fits into the deeper science or the things that drive our field. So early career folks, welcome. Vets, don't be too hard on me. And anybody else, let's go ahead and geek out a little bit. The Talent Practitioners Roundtable is a place for us to discuss things. And you're going to see our schedule that's listed on this slide here today. We're doing behaviors, knowledge, skills, and attributes around what creates success. In June, we're doing 360 best practices. In September, we're doing development strategies. And in December, we're doing selection and interviewing. So please feel free to come to our series or be part of that. I think December is really interesting because it's not how to interview, but how to know if you have the psychology of the job profile and the spec right, which means differentiated. It means the right mix of emotional intelligence. It means success behaviors in the profile. And the best thing that I learned as a recruiter about 5 years after I started recruiting was the psychology of the profile mattered the most. And it could be common or it could be differentiating, and how you knew if you had the difference before you ran out and started to interview. So I think December is very interesting, and certainly today underpins a solid and nice differentiating success profile. Okay, in terms of objectives in our session, we are going to explore best practices. We're going to talk about a specific talent area. Today it's behaviors. And we're going to work in some best practice information in here, as well as ask some questions about you from a roundtable perspective. There will be times where you get into the action, so keep your chat panel open and keep that conversation going. It's important that you know I chose the content for today from areas practitioners asked about, or were most curious about. I'm hoping to be pretty agnostic in our approach, and the research that I've selected is cited in most tech manuals, technical manuals for tools or instruments or science-based approaches. So if today changes how you read and understand a tech manual, then I think I've done some good in this world. Okay, what's in it for you to listen today? Elevated expertise, foundational research know-how, a common language, and we're going to throw it down and say, could you do an elevator pitch with today's information? If you had 60 seconds to summarize the discussion today, how would you describe a science-based approach using behaviors to describe success or a leadership profile and talent? If fate placed you in an elevator with your dream influencer, your organizational sponsor, and you only had the time it took to get from the top to the bottom of the building, what seminal authors would you casually work into the conversation? And I know this is a bit of a dream scenario, like we're ever going to be in an elevator again, but you get our gist here. And the other thing I want to mention is the seat at the table. There are so many strategic drivers that organizations continue to grapple with. Strategic talent management means having a seat at the table. It's the process of creating and sustaining individual competence that moves the organization forward. What's being asked of us? Maybe what's being asked of us is ensure you have the right people to do XYZ. Fill in any hairy, audacious business strategic intent or goal here. Maybe you're being asked to be the employer of choice. Maybe you're being asked to hire the best in the marketplace. We have to earn the right to have a seat at the table and do the work that demonstrates that we should keep it too. So that's an overlaying thread here as well. Okay, here's an interaction. So go ahead and open your chat panel. And we'd like to know, why did you join us today? What's your experience? Go ahead and say hi. Say where you're from. And are you new to the field? Are you in the talent field, but never studied this in school? Maybe you're an experienced practitioner who loves a good discussion. Maybe you know me or Garrick or TalentTelligent. Maybe you're just a total nerd. Maybe it's something else. Go ahead and write that in the chat panel. And throughout our time, do keep your chat panel open. Comment, expand, agree, engage Garrick in a parallel roundtable conversation. Very good. We got a lot of nerds out there. These are our people, Garrick. Okay, so we are going to be collecting questions and comments throughout the broadcast, so please do add those to the discussion. Okay, now, in full transparency, I have to say we work for a company called TalentTelligent, and we really like the guys that you see on the screen here. You're seeing Robert Eichinger and Roger Pierman, and they are our gurus. They're two well-known, often cited thought leaders in the talent space. And in a little circle down here on this slide, you're also seeing Michael Lombardo, who has lent his voice to some of the things that Eichinger and Pierman are working on in order to add to the experience and add to the research base. So Both have provided tools that Garrick and I, as practitioners, work on. They've written articles that's changed our thinking, and we have the privilege to learn and work with these two. So I need to call that out as a transparent issue. But you might look around at your bookshelf, and if you don't recognize their faces, here's a bunch of their books that if you look on your bookshelf, you just might see. From I'm Not Crazy, I'm Just Not You, new cover by Pierman. The U book, I think the FYIs are very well known by Eichinger Lombardo, The Leadership Machine, and some of the later kinds of contributions they've had just in the last couple of years. But those books are pretty cool. And all those books deal with different constructs. I'm going to use the term construct here for a second because a lot of people use different names for different things. So, what's in a name? Today, we're talking about a framework that helps focus employees' behavior on things that matter most to an organization and help them drive their success. So, here's a word cloud. You might use the traditional word competency. Behavioral competency is common in many dashboards. Success measures in a role, knowledge, skills, attributes are pretty ingrained in the literature. Go ahead and use the chat panel if you wouldn't mind to write a word or the nomenclature that your organization uses, or maybe your client bases use. What kind of word is it that you use when you talk about what does it take to be successful? Cool. Okay. We may not align on the word, but I think most researchers align on the definition. And academicians define what we're talking about as the observable, measurable skills and behaviors that contribute to workplace effectiveness and career success. So that's what we're talking about today. There are many in our field that really don't like the word competencies anymore. And that's hard to hear because of so much work that's been done in the competency field. One senior executive at an organization I worked at actually said, competency schmompetency, LM. I hate those. And I thought, oh, how are we going to get our talent management process going? So sadly, in a world that looks for some simple solutions, competency modeling work many times has been less than effective because maybe it's been a one-off, or maybe it's been a flavor of the month, or something that didn't connect to other things. But most experts do agree that without researched behavioral approaches to talent, the ability to manage them effectively in an organization, we're not going to do it. We're going to struggle to implement a talent strategy. There's a quote on this slide here that I really like from Ayubi, from a writer in the HR Talent Zone, who aptly summarizes, love them or hate them, most organizations use competency frameworks, but they often are decried by managers and staff. Is it time to shake them up, give them a different name, get them to add more value? At TalentTelligent, we think so. So we use the terminology that I think many academicians do, and I think a lot of grad schools talk about knowledge, skills, and attributes. And it's a whole person approach that considers what you know, the skills, the things that come out your hands, the attributes, the things that are much more inherent or attributional characteristics, the things that are within our starter kits and are what are behind most of what people work or bring to work every day, how people show up. So whatever view you take, it should be a whole person, comprehensive way to address the talent system. Okay, so I wanted to do some poll questions, and I just want to give a shout out and say this isn't a traditional poll question in the space of Zoom, but in general, in the chat panel, if you wouldn't mind, in the behavioral or the competency field, what thought leadership name or author is most familiar or known to you? I put a couple of names here, and you sure can add any other names that is just prevalent for you, but have you known Roger Pierman, Bob Eichinger, David Mcclelland, Lyle Spencer, C.K. Prahalad, Gary Hamel, Mark Uslid, one of my faves, and William Stevenson. These are some of the biggies. These are the names that you'll read in many of the tech manuals around behaviors, knowledge, skills, attributes, competencies. Garrick, is there any winners happening here?
We certainly have some of our favorites in there. A lot of Eichinger, some Lombardo and Pierman, and let's see, we've got Mcclelland that's come through, I think, at least twice as well.
Very good.
So yeah, some little trends.
Very good. All right, let's talk about them. Just as a quick public service announcement, I hope you all know about Google Scholar. So when you're working in talent or coaching or what have you, don't Google it. Don't Google it. Googling it will get you the ad or the person who paid to be at the top of the list. So be careful when you're talking about research. Go to Google Scholar, and you can get to Google Scholar by going through Google, frankly. And if you know about Google Scholar, let me know in the chat panel. I'm hoping that most of you do. It is the place for empirical scholarly articles that stand methodology requirements up, as well as do important peer reviews. So Google Scholar is the place for you to check for articles or empirical scholarly kinds of journals and research. Okay, so where did behaviors or competencies come from? This guy is thought to be the one who started the modern competency movement. This is David Mcclelland. He is one of the most widely cited because he essentially saw that there was a difference between intelligence and testing for intelligence, and that there were measures of competence in life and in leadership. Notice the little research icon that we have on this slide as well. This cites his seminal work and gives you formal citations in years as well. And I am going to give you a full list of citations. I think we have about 12 citations to offer you for foundational research today. But in general, whether or not it's communication, it's listening, strategic thought, he shaped the idea that there are libraries and described these groupings of success descriptors, the observable, the measurable skills and behaviors that contribute to workplace success. And that is David Mcclelland. And then in the 70s, in many assessment centers, they found that there were many organizations who were assessing roughly the same kinds of things, the same skills. They found substantial overlap across needed skill sets, and it became clear that a common set of behaviors, competencies, knowledge, skills, and attributes could specify a wide range of jobs across industries. So you're seeing a citation here of Thornton and Byam from 1982, and there are certainly wonderful ways in which leadership libraries or models were born. Okay, if you took a graduate class at this university, you were probably handed Signe Spencer's book, which is Competence at Work. And actually Lyle and Signe Spencer wrote this. It was written in '93. I know I got my copy at the University of Minnesota in about 2010, but notice the connections happening here. And this is a pretty dense book, I think. But Signe worked for Hay McBurr, which was acquired by Korn Ferry later on.
Hello.
They also.
Hey, Mr. Arnott, it's Robert from Dodd Awnings.
Yes.
Yeah. They also acquired Personnel Decisions International, which had libraries of behaviors as well. But Signe's work really had some major connections to Mcclelland and McBurr. And that became Hay McBurr in 1984, just to show you the gobble up nature of acquisitions. And Edward Hay, the Hay part of Hay McBurr, looked at jobs and measures like height and weight to be able to create scope and the size of what a job was. And what's really interesting about Edward Hay was he was a mentor to Isabel Briggs Myers of the MBTI notoriety. So let's just say there's a connection in all research-based kinds of perspectives and models. And Hay McBurr actually even has a connection to our own founders and the first work within the leadership architect and a little company called Lominger. So I'm hoping that you're hearing talent management, industrial psychology, research is connected. It's usually aligned. It's usually similar because the psychology is research-based and should be similar. Good, thank you. So all the research tells us to connect our efforts in talent. I love this systemic bubble here that shows the many initiatives in talent. So maybe you could use it to select, to hire, to grow, to develop, to deploy, to promote. What else is on here? To give feedback and support your valued talent across key levels and certainly across teams. Okay, so let's talk about some lessons learned and some things that we know to be true. And this is quite controversial, so buckle your seatbelts. The first piece here is basically pick a research model. If all the research and many respected worldwide firms have looked at the research from different angles and derived roughly the same library or personal management and leadership competencies, what does that say? We would tell you we would never throw another research-based company under the bus. Pick a model that fits you and your words and what you want for yourself and your organization. Stick with it. It's my hope that you like a research base that I work with, but in general, I'm showing you the research. The other thing is don't reinvent the wheel. And I unfortunately did this in my career and made up my own competency model that didn't really mean anything. So don't make up your own model. Eichinger has always said you are paying to rediscover the periodic table of elements and conducting a study to find out that planning and listening are critical in your organization. Most people would say to you, that's been done before. The other interesting thing is, and I'm really sorry about this, is you're not that special. You are not as unique as you think you would be. And I remember thinking my organization was super, super special, that we needed to change all the words and reinvent behaviors that weren't, or invent behaviors that weren't invented because we were that unique. And the point here is you're not as unique as you think you are. What you do may be unique in the marketplace. What competencies or behaviors are necessary to do it are not. And last but not least, make it your own. Take a research model and make it your own within your own organizational context. Avoid any not invented here. We don't like just research that doesn't pertain to us. And spend some time creating a common language, trying on those behaviors and prioritizing them within your organization so that you can align them to your mission, your vision, your values, your strategic intent, your next big project, or maybe it's your company's reinvention now here after COVID. So in the chat panel, feel free to comment here about any of these. Any of these seem like a burr under your saddle, or do you go, yeah, this is good advice? A really important author to mention here is William Stevenson, who brought us an important method that many of us has taken part in, and that would be card sorting. Many methods in the competency or knowledge, skills, and attribute and behavioral space have practitioners using science-based terms and putting them on cards and putting them into little piles, creating context for their organization, making decisions about what's the priority, what's mission critical to leadership in the next 3 years, whatever. Stevenson created something known as the Q method. And the Q method is a form of factor analysis. And factor analysis has been used to describe factors or their larger organizing bodies of how behaviors hang together to explain a variety of results like success in leadership. And the second citation here is Brown. And Brown did a marvelous job at summarizing the work into a primer of sorts. And Roger Pearman had me read this a while ago just to be able to say, this is an important add to our space because the Q technique looks for correlations between subjects across a sample of variables and shared thinking. And the data then comes from a variety of sorts, from 1 or 2 people. And what it does is it ranks them. And it ranks those research-based variables, capturing an idea about how people think, or about how things work in relationship to one another, in relationship to other ideas, rather than in isolation. Relative comparison is what we call it. Card sorting. So putting cards into highest or lowest piles in relationship to a sort question around business problem comes from Stevenson. Sorting can happen physically with cards in your hands or virtually on an electronic platform. And it's an amazing way to create a common language of talent with people in your organization. Maybe some of you have worked to socialize language and descriptors about leadership within your organization. But we know holding the science in your hands and making decisions about whether or not you're working to describe success for leaders, managers, or individual contributors or teams matters. And it creates a powerful talent management deliverable too. So you could come out of card sorting with a recruiting profile, something to hire against, something to coach to, something to do 360s against, something to manage performance against, and more. So thank you, Stevenson. All right, so how many competencies or behaviors does it take to describe success? You see some pretty big numbers on the screen here today. 67 was the whole person approach from Lombardo and Eichinger. And Lominger was sold to Korn Ferry in 2007, and that work was revised at Korn Ferry to 38, which included only behaviors, as there were lots of other ways to measure attributes and other kinds of things that really the culture of PDI influenced quite greatly. Another talent company that, and PDI was another talent company that came out of the University of Minnesota. Go my alma mater there. And TalentTelligent has roles and practices and knowledge, skills, and attributes in observable formats that are around 27 or so by level. All right, so what did you say, LM? Did you actually say 67? Did you say 38? Again, in your chat panel, tell me what your appetite for a library or a model, a descriptor of success might look like. How many does it include? Does it include 3 to 4, 5 to 8, 10 to 16, 27 to 30, 67? More? Since we're doing it in the chat panel, you could say 200, I don't know. As many as it takes to describe success. Garrick, what do you think people are going to say?
I think they're going to think it's a trick question and say as many as it takes to describe success. Yeah, see, Tim just played right into my hand. Yes. No tricks here, though. No
Tim
tricks.
knows too much. Tim knows too much. Yeah. Well, I think it's important. When we think about what's the right number, we say it depends. It depends. It depends on what you're doing. So maybe you are describing what some folks call core competencies, core to everything that everyone does here at Acme Corporation. You can't work here unless you have fill in the blank. Let's call it integrity or trust or our mission, vision, values. Interesting to note, Prahalad and Hamel's research suggests that the alignment to strategy usually creates something called core competencies that distinguishes the firm that you're talking about in the marketplace, and it describes organizational capability. Many academicians use the term core competence or core capability for these in the OD or organizational development space. So you're talking about a collective, a group, an organization, compared to maybe competence of an individual is very different. So a lot of people say, I have to start with these. I start with these core, let's call them 6, and then I start to layer on other things. And this is just one example. I might have some things that everybody and their mom needs to have in our organization because they manifest who we're trying to be at our company. But then we start to say, and here's what a manager does, and add on some behaviors there. And let's just add to the numbers here. Maybe we add 8 to 10 because of what managers do, and maybe we add 10 based on what individual contributors do and call that their library. So now we're up to what, about 16, certainly at a minimum, to have enough to describe what success looks like in a differentiating way. So Prahalad and Hamill, just quickly, here's the citation. We note Prahalad and Hamill because they really help to define the idea around management strategy and the connection of those behaviors to key critical skills. And they really believed that companies could gain a competitive advantage by evaluating themselves and thinking about what is the thread that runs through our organization. The citation is here. You can see our little icon there about the citation. Prahalad and Hamill have a huge body of work. In fact, one of the most startling articles I read in grad school was some not so nice things that they had to say about whether or not we had earned our seat at the table as talent practitioners. So know that as well. The problem with just a fewer core competencies is that there's very little differentiation. So if we have 6 behaviors that describe our intent could be that we're focused on our customer and that we drive for results and that we do it with ethics and integrity. Those could be our core competencies or our core behaviors or whatever you call them, but they're also everybody else's. So it's core, it's common. You have behaviors in a success profile that have become the average bear. So if you're being asked to recruit for 6 things that most people have, you're probably not recruiting with differentiation. Or if you're coaching against 6 things that everybody has, you're probably not coaching someone to be a standout leader. So what we're talking about is differentiators. Things that most people can't do should be in the library as well. Things like conflict management, or things like courage, or things like emotional intelligence, or things like understanding others. Those are the real superhero behaviors. And if you really want to be the employer of choice, you've got to look for the superheroes. You want Batman and you want Jane Foster to work for you. You want Wonder Woman. And there is something called a simple monster out there who is undermining talent. There it is. Folks are falling prey to the too short, too simple, small numbered libraries or models. Don't do less for your people than what you would do in any other methodology in your organization. I worked for a company that placed more focus on the 100 gap procedures, gap accounting procedures and principles, but they really asked us to sum up for people only 4 descriptors. So it was a hard seesaw here. And our example here is the human body has 206 bones. What if your sponsor came and said, could you make it 4? Which 4 are going to hold that structure together? So science-based solutions are not simple. We're talking about industrial psychology. Humans are complex. Solutions should be as complex as they need to be to solve real talent issues. And in our work, we work to be easy to do business with, and we work to put tools in clients' hands so that they can make talent something the organization can all talk about in a easy way. In general, what's the right number? It depends. Think of it like a library. You need enough books in your library. Behaviors are the books to take down and do certain things in talent management. Do you need 16 to describe a job well? Differentiate performance? Do you need a few to interview for? Do you need some that connect to teams or things that are inherent in potential to prime your pipeline? You need to take down the right number of behaviors for whatever it is that you're trying to do. A lot of organizations actually differentiate competencies or behaviors by level. They have been creating models that graduate and take 6 core and somehow change the definition across each level. Let's just say communication. So maybe at the individual contributor level, I communicate clearly. Maybe at the manager level, I communicate influentially. And maybe at the executive top of the house, I communicate strategically. That doesn't create a lot of differentiation. And there have been extensive normative studies that tell us that certain behaviors have greater skill and use and opportunity depending on the level that you're at. So hence the idea that you need different things for different levels becomes a really important piece. And more recently in the literature and much literature, we continue to cite Kaiser and Craig, and I've got a couple of other Kaiser and Craig articles that they have written that really show a big body of research around the differences between jobs at different levels in the organizational hierarchy. So in general, think about it. There are about 3 levels, and there's certainly 3 levels reflected in our tools, but individual contributors, managers and supervisors, leaders, people at the top of the house, lead the enterprise, have very different things that are being asked of them. And if you don't think about this before, or you subscribe to a one-size-fits-all, think about it. Have you ever seen somebody promoted from individual contributor totally flame out and fail as a manager? Let me know in the chat panel. Have you seen somebody who's a great performer at an individual contributor level and flame out and fail as a manager? And I'm seeing some yeses because the job is different. There are different things being asked of us as a manager. Yes, great. So research icons, we tell you Kaiser and Craig citation, and that will be listed in our citations as well. But there is a beautiful book by our founders and my colleague on this webinar, actually a couple of colleagues on this webinar, Spinelli and Mr. Throckmorton are cited within the Develop It Yourself book for individual contributors. And it resonates and is so meaningful to me as a coach, because being an individual contributor in my world has always been a forgotten community and a forgotten population that didn't get direct development on things that matter. And now they do. So we have a leveled research. We subscribe to leveled research, and that was an important part of our decision at TalentTelligent to have libraries. And again, in our opinion, talent approaches need to be systemic and interconnected. And then here's the big question. What's the economic benefit of using behavioral descriptors? Is there an ROI? It's another chat panel. Is there an ROI on using behavioral descriptions in talent management? So first choice is nope. B is it's really hard to say and measure. Some of you may subscribe to things like Kirkpatrick, Don Kirkpatrick from Wisconsin. I think he was a Green Bay Packer fan. But the 4 levels of measurement is a really important body of work, certainly in learning and development. But in terms of ROI, we have a different set of researchers. So yeah, indeed, certainly I love that. We would tell you that there is significant research. The literature will tell you that the answer was C. There is a return on investment with the use of behaviors to describe success in talent. Emotional intelligence, leadership development, coaching, succession tools impact the bottom line. And if you're not sure, check your P&L and see how big the salary line for people is. And then you might give you some fortitude and have you eat your Wheaties when you go in and you say, what I do matters and what we do is important. And one of the biggest expense lines on our P&L is our people. So how are we getting the most out of them for what we pay today? There's a difference between somebody being paid and performing at this level, and then what does it mean for an organization if that individual gets developed and performs at this level? So there are lots of ways to look at return on investment. Now, the authors noted by our research icon in this space include Lyle Spencer, who did a lot of return on investment studies and a big body of work there. And certainly our own Lombardo and Eichinger. And I will tell you, Pearman knows so much in this space as well, and was pointing me to a number of things to share with you. One of my favorite measurement people in our space is a guy named Mark Uslid. And I put his picture here just because I like him that much. He is a professor who taught at Rutgers and has spoken on the circuit at a number of professional talent management field conferences. I had a wonderful opportunity to meet him, and I got a little tongue-tied when I met him. But he has collaborated with other very well-known people, namely Dave Ulrich, another friend of our firm, on some of the best scorecard books to show our efforts in talent management. So if you haven't looked at some of the scorecard books or watch Mark Uslid, I don't think he's at Rutgers anymore. I think he's doing more consulting, but he's got a website, and I have his citation for you as well. Really wonderful ways to create balanced scorecards in the talent space for you to measure too. Okay, so citations before we start talking about this. Here's some key sources and citations. And I think my advisor at the University of Minnesota might be proud of me because I think I'm pretty close to APA format. I don't know, you guys can nick me here, but I think in general, this is what you will find within Google Scholar of some of the things that we've talked about. So whether it's more of the what's the thought process and anecdotes in HR Zone 2 Brown on the Q methodology, to Eichinger, Pearman, Spinelli, Throckmorton on the individual contributor behaviors, to Uslid, Kaiser, Craig, Overfield, Yarborough, in a number of ways that they look at the differentiation between jobs. Certainly, one of my favorite books is The Leadership Machine, and many of you noted that as well. And Mcclelland is on here, as well as Prahalad and Hamill, Lyle Spencer, Lyle and Signe Spencer, Stevenson, the foundational seminal research around the relative comparison and the factor analysis that sorting creates, as well as Thornton and Byam. So that's page 2 of our nerdy citations. So let me ask you this. What research caught your eye in the context of your work? What might you look into further on, say, Google Scholar? And I'm just going to go ahead and throw up a question here. Is it some of the perceptions about how we're doing in the talent space? Is it card sorting methodology with Stevenson, and I like Brown's primer? Is it some of the new DIYs? Is it Kaiser and Craig and Overfield? Is it Lombardo and Eichinger and the Leadership Machine? Is it Mcclelland? Is it Uslid? Is it Ulrich? Is it HRD scorecard kinds of works? And I don't know if you can see on this snag, maybe it's William Stevenson, the guy himself. Oh, he is up there. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I hope we have piqued your interest in some of the foundational stuff around this. And again, back to my original goal. If you look at a technical manual a little bit differently now because of today, I hope that this has lent itself to that. But also, if you are interested in taking our challenge, create an elevator pitch. How would you describe some of the seminal research, or how would you describe or make a quick case in the term of an elevator pitch around the importance of getting the behaviors, the knowledge, skills, and attributes right in a role? How would you describe what success really looks like, what the role entails, and the behavioral approach to what underpins it? Yeah, we're total nerds. And Dan, I don't know if you're willing to be point, but maybe we can put your email out there in the chat panel, and you can be the supreme ruler who looks at elevator pitches.
I will do that. I shared my email earlier. I'll put it in again in case you're late to the conversation or you didn't grab it.
Perfect. All right, so start organizing your questions in the chat panel. I'm going to tee up next time while you do that, and then we'll take a little bit of time here to have that conversation. But let me get the business end part here done. So we hope that you join us on June 17th, where we're going to be talking about 360s and best practices. And again, our founders, Pierman, Eichinger, have led the way for us, and certainly on an integrity-filled, good guy, best practice perspective about 360s. But a book that those good guys handed me is pictured here. And it is a book by Alan Church Bracken et al. And no, there is no affiliation here. Then I was asked by our founders to read this just to keep a pulse on some of the most current thought, certainly in 2019 and 2020 around 360s, to think about it, to know it. And this handbook of strategic 360 feedback is on my nightstand. The other book that you see pictured here might already be on your nightstand, and it is a book that was used in a number of grad school programs, and we'll definitely talk about the voice of Eichinger in his foundational work within the leadership machine. Maybe you can get it on Amazon, maybe you can get it somewhere. But we'll talk about that and more, and we hope that you'll join us on June 17th, especially if you're a coach, especially if you're thinking about coaching and delivering feedback. We'll talk about best practices. And just a quick reminder, Eichinger and Gareth Rockmorton are doing a free webinar tomorrow, Friday, March, is it the 19th tomorrow, about our tools if you're interested in learning more. And you can go to TalentTelligent.com and register. Maybe Garrick, you can throw that registration in the chat panel too. But do visit our website, follow us on social media. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. We can be nerds together. And if you're interested in knowing more about what Eichinger and Pierman are doing now that they've arced their careers, now that they've pulled all this research together and said, this is what I really wanted to do, know that the TalentTelligent 2-pager is available to you on our website. We also have virtual events, both certifications and complimentary webinars. So with that, I'm going to pause. I dumped a lot of research on you, and I hope it either piqued your interest. So Garrick, what are folks saying on the chat panel, and maybe we open it up and have a few minutes of discussion?
Most people just had a negative reaction to your scoffing at the Green Bay Packers. I think that was the main thing. But as a Bears fan, I had the same reaction. So
sorry. Yeah, deal with it.
No questions at this point. So if you do have them, pop them in here. But I'd like to ask you this. I mean, you sort of went through all this research, obviously not only in your career but in preparation. Which piece of research is your favorite? You sort of spoke highly of all of them, but is there one that you found to be most useful or influential, so on and so forth?
I have to say, Roger pointing me towards Stevenson and the idea that relative comparison creates its own factor analysis and validates a process that lends itself to something I've been doing forever, which is card sorting, made me the happiest. There is a piece of research that I would mention maybe as a prelude to our 360 discussion. And it was something I saw in school, and it was something that we've distributed in certifications previously. But it's a study called Flawed Self-Assessment, and it's by Dunning, Heath, and Sewells. Gosh, I haven't looked at that in a long time. I think that's right. And it really talks about how we have a perception of ourselves, and that our perception is typically flawed, and that sometimes we volunteer for heroic missions like in the military, or sometimes as we age, we think we know better than our doctors and change our prescriptions. And maybe some of us as parents think that our kids are just the bomb and are prodigies in violin. That we have this idea that there's this flawed perception, and what Dunning, Heath, and Sewells did was really identify how self-perception plays into much of the work that we do. So when we look at 360, or when we think about self-awareness being a key to potential and much of the work that we do in the talent space, I think I think that one lends itself, and I think that was in the 90s. I will take that in a parking lot and I will cite that in June. Oh,
thank you. Yeah, I had a, oh, here's a question. You see it? You want to go ahead and read that one?
Yeah. I have so much going on my screen. What does it say?
It says, what approaches have you all found are most helpful in getting an organization to adopt a common behavioral language for talent?
Let's open it up. Anybody want to be brave?
I'll add something really quickly. And coincidentally, I posted on this on LinkedIn yesterday, just coincidentally. But in my experience, I was in a role for a long time that looked at the coherence of various models, tools, and language within larger organizations, and found that the more disparate and disconnected or competing these were, the more the organizations had fragmented silos, had fragmented budgets, and had people that really were completely aligned in a unique way that wasn't like their colleagues or their other departmental teammates. And I think a coherence piece is a great argument. Are we all talking about the same thing? Are those observable? Are they measurable? Can we remember them? So brain science comes in. Is it too complicated? So when you start talking about complexity, decoherence, and complication, it's a good argument to say, let's refine, let's unify, and let's create a unified common understanding so that we're all talking about the same thing. We're all hiring against the same thing. We're all promoting and developing against the same thing, coaching against the same thing. If we don't have that, then we have multiple organizations working independent of one another. So anyway, one thought.
I would love to see if anyone in the group would take a stab at what's worked for them. Also with Kathy's question, I'll buy a little bit of time and I'll say, oftentimes in my experience, what I've done is try to use non-HR examples when it comes to a common language of leadership, right? Because we're trying to influence stakeholders, and sometimes I can get a little bit too HR centric with the example. So I'll always use the following one, which is when I say the word brand, what comes up into your mind? And I'll be more specific and I'll say Coca-Cola is a brand. Like, what comes to your mind? And people will say red, soda, soft drink, pop, depending on your region, I guess, right? Sugar, polar bears, Santa, the holidays. So I'll get all these different answers. I go, so that's a prime example that it has nothing to do with HR, about how a word can solicit a whole bunch of different meanings if we don't define it. So even creating a common language of leadership, when we're talking about a behavior, we need to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So I found for me, just as a little technique, is to use something that's non-HR related to help people see how a word can stir up a whole bunch of different sort of consequences. So I'd love to hear what other people say. If there's any other thoughts, you can just unmute and have at it. Yeah, so Gray, some organizations are showing an interest in a common behavioral language to allow for greater transparency and consistency in career pathing as an example. Absolutely. Yeah, Kathy. Yep. Kathy's had a similar experience than I have to use business terms and non-HR terms. I think we've got some folks even on this call that are sit out in the business and are not HR people traditionally, which is perfect. We're so glad that they're here. They probably like that comment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really important comment. What we were talking about here today is the research behind our field. And it's not the thing that we lead with at the table, other than be able to know our stuff and have it underpin our position so that we know that there's a body of science behind it. But we have to be able to put our work into business terms to gain sponsorship, to get a common language going. you got to know the geeky stuff behind it, but I don't know that I'd be trotting that out to keep my seat at the table. I'd be using the business terms that Garrick was talking about for sure.
Yeah.
Changing that. So, well, thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of feedback. How did we do? Were we geeky enough for you? Did we give you something that you didn't know? Tell us, what was the gap? Was this helpful for you today? And do you plan on coming to see us again in our next session? We really appreciate having you here, and certainly for spending some time with us. And I can't convey enough that this is one of the most important jobs and work that exists. The ability to impact talent and how people feel about work and what they do every day and where they spend most of their time is a really important privilege. And I think the work, there's just no better work out there. And speaking of good work, it is definitely fun to be able to show you authors and researchers and even our own who are doing their best work. And here's just one notation about iking or impairment that I want to leave you with. So thank you very much. And from everybody at TalentTelligent, we hope you have a great rest of your week and make it a great day.